One of the questions that seems to be coming up for atheists a lot at the moment is whether or not religious people ought to be given respect for their views, and the concept of respect in a society where people have very divergent views. What's your take on that?
Well, of course, I think until very recently, perhaps the last 10 years or so, religion survived in Europe and in North America, where it's been diminishing. I mean, it's an interesting phenomenon, that one, because of the respect agenda. I have a faith, you must respect me. After 9/11, this has changed very dramatically. I don't think anybody deserves to be respected for choosing to be, you know, a Labour Party or Liberal Party or Church of England or Catholic or something like that. What they should be respected for is their own personal merits as an individual human being. Contrast the case of somebody who comes with a very obvious religious symbol like a large crucifix or a burqa, saying, this is my identity and I'm signed up and this is how I want you to treat me. One's response to that should be to say, well, I'm not interested in how you choose to present yourself. I'm interested in you as a person. That's the thing I want to respect. But on this respect debate, it's very important to distinguish two things. One is the grounds you have for respecting somebody, what kinds of reasons you would have for respecting them. And secondly, the place of religion and the religious voice in the public square. And these are two quite separate matters. I mean, I think there are lots of very unrespectable political and other kinds of ideologies which are entitled to have a place in the public square, entitled to have their say, and to be part of the conversation. And certainly the religions very much are entitled to be there and to put their point of view. The kind of thing that concerns secularists like me is that because of historical reasons and because of institutional and political ones, they get a vastly over-amplified voice in the public square. I mean, think about Australia. You know, 1 in 5 of your school kids educated in a Catholic school. Now, the Catholic Church is against contraception and pregnancy termination and stem cell research and discriminates against gay people and so on. And it's an anxiety for people to think that children are being educated by a religious movement which has this kind of commitment. In the UK, we've got bishops in the House of Lords, we've got any number of religious programs being broadcast every day. You know, we've got a huge over-presence of religion in the public square for historical reasons. And what we want to say is, you've got every right to be there, but you've got to be there on the same terms as everybody else. You're a trades union, really. You're a self-interest group, you know, organising in order to put your point of view. Finance yourself and compete with the other voices in the square. At the moment, you're given a very privileged position, tax-exempt status, an amplifier, a loudspeaker in society. And that, I think, is a problem for secularists.
Do you think it's possible within say a church school movement or something like that, to do that interrogation, that sort of inquiry that you seem to hold so dear?
Yes, I do. But again, one has to think how it should be done. It's tremendously important in history and sociology classes in schools that the whole range of human traditions should be understood properly, examined and interrogated, as you say. But also very important, I think, that these traditions shouldn't be implicated in, for example, science classes. So we have a problem in the United States of America especially about trying to get creationism or intelligent design taught on an equal footing with science, as though it were a legitimate controversy. It isn't. You know, the modern contemporary world needs science and technology to solve our problems as well as to continue our economic and other kinds of advance. And it muddies the water tremendously if you bring in things that are not relevant. We wouldn't expect our medical students to study, you know, traditional magic, let's say, or herbalism or something. We wouldn't expect our astronomers who are trying to get people to the moon and back to study astrology half the time. So why should we expect biologists to study any of the creation myths, of which there are very, very many?
Seems to antiquity. Me that those sort of things do belong in the curriculum, but in a different place, in philosophy of science, in history, in art, in literature, in perhaps philosophy. The sorts of questions that arise in the religious traditions are often from those disciplines.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right.
Let's talk a little bit about why you're in Australia. You're here for the Global Atheist Convention. This is a very large gathering of people in Melbourne. Around about 5,000 people, I think, have sold out the Melbourne Convention Centre. Why do you think there's such interest to gather together a group of people who are naturalists or atheists?
Well, I think the non-religious standpoint has always been a very individual one. There's always been one atheist, if you see what I mean, because however many millions of them there are, they don't get together on any day of the week and pool their resources and have their radio programs and think tanks.
They have no Sabbath.
They have no Sabbath, exactly. So if you look at, for example, the American experience, according to Pew polling, you've got so many million, perhaps 60 million or so self-described evangelicals and about 30 million self-described agnostics or atheists or non-committed people. But the evangelicals, of course, are incredibly well organized. They have their radio stations, television stations, lobbies in Washington. But the 30 million atheists are equal to one person because they're not organized.
Why don't they organize?
Well, because they sort of think for themselves and they're individual and they don't feel the need to organize, while the trend in history until about 10 years ago seemed to be that societies, at least in the West, were secularizing and that people could have their faith position, but it didn't obtrude too much on the public debate or influence public policy too much. People were prepared to let it go. And on the other hand, people of religion tended not to avow it and stand up and start making, sermons or things at dinner parties, more or less kept it to themselves. Your religious commitment was a bit like your sex life. You didn't advertise it too much in public. And that was sort of okay, and everybody kept a respectful or at least a polite, a courteous distance from one another about it. And 9/11 has changed that. It's completely changed the terms of the debate. It's become very polarized. A lot of people who were closet Christians or Muslims or something and now take a stand in public and say that they do it. Your Prime Minister loves to be photographed in front of the church door every Sunday. There he is. And other people look at that and they say, okay, this man's the Prime Minister of a country, flourishing, rich country, and he has a commitment to Christianity. And that means that he must at some point be a hypocrite because in the documents of his faith it says, take no thought for the morrow. But he's the Prime Minister of a country. Now, which obligation is he going to observe? And so people stand up and they want to be critical about it and they want to challenge over these things and ask the hard questions.
I hope they'll be asking harder questions than that one, though, of the Prime Minister.
Well, yeah.
One final question for you. Coming out of this convention, I guess people have hopes that it will have a good impact on the society at large. How optimistic are you that religious people and naturalists will be able to live together in Western society in particular?
Well, this has got to happen, so we've got to find a way of doing this, of making some kind of modus vivendi where we get out of the situation we're in at the moment, which is that it's all a bit bad-tempered and a bit acerbic, and people are pointing fingers and shouting. No doubt that will go on also. But it has to be possible, I think, for a politician in the United States of America to stand up and say, I don't have a religious commitment, but I am going to stand for president and perhaps be elected. That possibility has to be something that emerges from a broader and deeper understanding of why people reject a religious worldview. It doesn't mean they're going to be mass murderers and rapists and everything else, which is the old thing. If you're an atheist, you don't have God watching you in the dark, you can do anything you like. That kind of misunderstanding has to be got out of the way.
Professor Grayling, thanks for contributing to the dialogue.
Great pleasure.